afternoon all, and welcome to our Rebooting the On-Trade for 2021 webinar. I'm Andrew Catchpole, editor of Harpers Wine Spirit, and this is the first event we've run in collaboration with Trade Hospitality, which, as many of you will be aware, recently launched its Trade Hospitality app. Well worth a download if you're interested in the benefits and networking opportunities it offers, possibly especially at this moment in time. Now, I'm joined today by a great panel of restaurant and bar operators for our rebooting discussion. We're going to hear from them all in a little while. We have Stephen Finch, founder of Vagabond Wines, Karan Gokani, who's director of Harpers Restaurants, part of the JKS group, Gunewardena, who's CEO at D&D London, Adam Handling, chef proprietor of Handling Restaurant Group, and Steve Pineau, co-owner of the L'Atelier du Vin wine bars in my hometown of Brighton. So welcome all, thanks for joining us. Now, when we originally chose this date, it wasn't clear that today would be the day that Boris would outline the roadmap for the country's gradual climb back towards some sort of normality. Given that details are emerging as we speak, but with hospitality still facing some while to go before a phased reopening, it perhaps seems even more apt to be having this conversation now. With restaurants, bars and hotels facing unprecedented challenges when the hospitality sector does begin to reopen this spring into summer, the idea for today's discussion is to look at how best the sector can navigate the road ahead. And part of that will be maximising custom and boosting profitability in a tough and still evolving climate. Before opening up to a general discussion, and audience, please do use the Q&A function for any questions you may have along the way. We'll endeavour to get to as many as we can. We're going to ask each panellist to spend a couple of minutes highlighting where they are at, what they've learned, and their strategy for taking the best of those learnings forward, with each focusing on a slightly different aspect of their business. First, though, we're going to consider the bigger picture. As I say, today is probably an interesting time to be doing that, relating to the government support, or perhaps, better put, failure to provide enough support for the trade. And Des, I think you have pretty clear views on that. So would you like to begin? When we spoke earlier, you highlighted the ongoing need for lobbying for further support and grants. We spoke about the ways that city centres have changed quite fundamentally, home working, no tourism and so on, and also the part that restaurants and bars could and should play in the recovery. So I don't know, Des, if you want to begin with a few thoughts on that, that would be great.
Firstly, Andrew, this is the absolutely worst timing, because we're talking just as I'm actually looking at my mobile phone to see how this statement comes out. Yeah, look, I think the biggest issue of all for us, firstly, I mean, today is when are we going to be able to reopen? So I think we're going to hear that that the industry is we won't be able to open restaurants inside until the middle of May, which seems to me to be an absolutely amazingly late, given where we are with the vaccines and so on. Again, we'll see. I'm actually looking at my phone as the statement is coming out. There is the briefing I think the government must have given out to the press this morning was suggesting that we'll be able to open terraces, outdoor terraces in April, which for us will be, we've got half our restaurants have got quite big terraces, so that would be positive, but a lot of restaurants haven't, so that won't do them very much good. So apart from knowing when we can reopen, I think I've got a very strong feelings about government support, and I think there is a thought just generally in the UK, and I think the government thinks this, that the government's been really, really good on supporting the industry. And if you start from the point of view of, well, you know what, if you get closed by the government, well, you're not entitled to anything. So anything you get, you should be grateful for. Well, I suppose, if you take that view, then the answer may be, yeah, well, we've got furlough, we've got these grants and so on. We've had the business rates. But to be blunt, compared with the other countries with which we trade, we're in the US, we're in New York, and we're in Paris. The government support, particularly in the second wave, has been absolutely shockingly bad. And we have been, well, not just us, even hospitality, obviously, and a lot of people who talk to the press and so on, I mean, banging on about this, and it just seems to fall on deaf ears. I mean, to give you some sense of what it means for us, I mean, we every month that we're closed, it costs us £1.5 million, including sorry. excuse me, let me switch my phone off. It's a huge amount of money, and we make, when we're open, we're actually losing more money every month being closed than we will make when we're open. So the lockdown has been a massive killer for us, and I suppose in terms of specific asks for the government, what we're saying is, look, you need to do something to allow businesses which are truly on their knees to be able to reopen. You've got to help them in terms of dealing with the big debt we've all taken on because we've had to fund lockdown. So if you remember, we had the job retention scheme grant, which was talked about. Well, that disappeared. That needs to come back. We need to have a solution to the rents with a moratorium ending. So there's some funding that needs to come in to be able to allow us to sort that out. And then looking forward, as everybody has been lobbying for, we need an extension of the business rates reliefs and the VAT reliefs to enable us to get through the recovery. And as a comparison, in Paris, if you take our business in Paris and take our business in New York, we have larger restaurants, so they're not small. If you've got a small little pub business, then you're probably doing okay with these grants. But if you take a restaurant like Bluebird, so we have a Bluebird in New York, we have a Bluebird in London, and we have a restaurant called Alcazar in Saint-Germain, Paris, which is sort of roughly equivalent to the size. Now, the comparison of government support, additional government support that we've received in those countries, in New York, we've received just over $1 million of support for this second lockdown. In Paris, now with the further extension of that lockdown, we've received €400,000. In the UK, we have received £9,000 plus the £3,000 a month grant. So I do think that this government lobbying, and it's boring, to be honest, it's boring. I get bored reading about it, and everyone's lobbying, but it's falling on deaf ears, and we keep telling our story in the hope that I guess now the next opportunity will be the budget. We thought Rishi would do something before then, but I really hope that Rishi steps up in the budget next Wednesday and properly supports his industry, because he has his support. It was great, I think, it was pretty good in the first lockdown with Eat Out to Help Out and some of the reliefs we had then. But given the length of this lockdown, we would have been closed down compulsorily by the government for 9 full months when this is over. He has to step up and do something. He really owes it to us.
It does. Just actually, we had a quick question in from Alan Montague Dennis in the audience, and he's asking, and it's a question I was looking at asking as well. If you were PM, asks Alan, what would your solution be given the gravity of the pandemic? Do you think that we can push for an earlier reopening in the hospitality industry if strict COVID controls were applied? And I think it's worth just bringing this in and dealing with this at the moment. What are your thoughts? And then maybe I can bring in, I know, Stephen, you've got strong views on this as well. So a couple of comments on that.
Do you want me to speak first?
Yes, why not? As just a continuum, yeah.
Okay, I think on the as Boris has said, we need to be governed by the data. Now, and let's be clear, the data that we had right through last summer and all the data that's coming out every week from Public Health England was not indicating that COVID was happening in restaurants and pubs. It wasn't. We had an explosion in COVID infections when the schools and universities went back in the UK. It's as blindingly obvious. It's what actually happened in the US as well. So I firmly believe that the environments we've created do not, we can create COVID-safe environments. However, that argument is gone. We have to now deal with the fact that politically and so on, we need to be towing the line. So I think what I would say is, please, Prime Minister, look at the data on the vaccines. He said that what's most important is not just getting the number of infections down, but the impact on hospitalizations and deaths. That's the most important thing. Looking at the data, please reopen us as soon as you can. And I really think I don't know, I'm not a scientist, obviously, but looking at the data as a layman, I cannot see why we don't get reopened for Easter.
I mean, I can't imagine is there any dissent on the panel to that? Or, and I know, Stephen, we've spoken about this and you've written about this in Harpers fairly recently. So anything to add to that, or is that just a given, would you say?
Oh, it's definitely a given, and very, very well said, Des. The one thing I would add is it's really unfortunate to hear them change their focus from deaths to infections, because that's exactly the wrong metric in this situation. And I personally think they're going to lose the country if they focus on that, because once people stop dying, which is pretty much any week now, good luck trying to keep people out of pubs. We're all done. We're all done with lockdown. So when people stop dying, good luck keeping people out of pubs and restaurants.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a very difficult call, isn't it? Okay, so what we need there is for the industry collectively, for publications like ours, trade journals that are embedded in the trade, to basically continue to apply pressure and to lobby and to make these points very, very clearly. Okay, well, we can't sort of park that as the backdrop, and that's why I wanted to address the sort of the macro picture, the very serious big picture challenges facing hospitality, restaurants, bars. But what I also do want to do is that as people reopen, I think there's an obvious sense that we're going to have difficulties with some people that are going to go flying out of the door, like so I certainly will, booking places up and going out as much as possible once I'm safely allowed to do so. There will probably be a reticent proportion of the population as well that almost will need sort of, retraining, having been, trained to stay at home for a year, or at least many parts of that. So I think it's going to be difficult for operators, very obviously, but the idea of maximizing areas of the business that have been pulling in at least some money, some revenue, will possibly be very important. So I wanted to now drill down and look at some sort of examples of what you've been doing as businesses, but more importantly, what from that you can take forward as we go through this kind of strange, gradual sort of reopening period that we're looking at, and God forbid, other sort of mutant strains coming out and causing a fourth lockdown and so on. Karan, maybe we could start with you. You described yourself as being more involved in the sort of nuts and bolts of the day-to-day at JKS and Hoppers, and talked about diversification and looking ahead to work in a smarter, more efficient way to sort of enable some of that diversification you've been through, experienced, and driven to come out. Could you share a little of that with us and how you're looking to progress? Yeah.
Sure. Thanks, Andrew. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks, Andrew. So, I mean, firstly, I might correct you there. I don't, while I do look at, while I'm involved in everything Hoppers related, obviously JKS is our parent brand, and although it's family, we tend to sort of try and, run businesses at arm's length. But I will share with you some of the knowledge that, I have gained from JKS as well. In terms of Hoppers purely as a business, I guess in a way we were fortunate because we opened our most ambitious restaurant, our third site in King's Cross, only a month before lockdown. And what a month it was. So, in a sense, I look back at Feb last year and I can't imagine it was a year ago, but at the same time, it feels a lifetime ago. We were fortunate to have this sort of large site with a covered terrace in a really interesting area. I think there's a lot of development. King's Cross has grown a lot in the last few years, but I still see there's a lot of potential there. In fact, during the last lockdown, our sister restaurant Bao opened doors right next to us as well, and they've been doing pretty well, especially on takeaway. So it was a shock to the system, as it was for everyone when we were suddenly told to close overnight, just having ridden along through a fairly successful opening. And quickly we started thinking, obviously the first 8 months, and I think that first lockdown was probably the hardest it's been for all of us, both at a personal level, as well as a business, because there was no revenue stream. We were sort of chasing our tail. We didn't know what's happening. This is it's the first time for everyone. Although we were, embedded in industry discussions, there just wasn't a solution at that point. And all of us sort of expected it to be a lot shorter. But then towards the end of that, sort of June, July, we looked at reopening delivery. So fortunately, as a brand, we had already tweaked and created a good, solid delivery product and offering from our Soho restaurant. It was very much in the pipeline, and we had designed the site at King's Cross to be able to do deliveries as part of its business model. And when I say design the site, with a second hatch to lead out with an area for the drivers and to kind of maintain that front of house experience and the delivery experience, because the drivers are an essential part and we want to look after them as well. So fortunately, we were able to quickly shift resource to focusing on that segment. And King's Cross has proven to be a very popular delivery hub. We've been doing really good numbers out of King's Cross. Obviously, a drop in the ocean compared to what that site would have done as a fully fledged site. And we had glimpses of that when we reopened between lockdowns. Something else that was born out of, it wasn't born out of lockdown, but I think it kind of took life out of lockdown. It was something that I was always keen on doing. And, I think Adam's going to talk a lot more about this. He's seen this, he's really been involved in that. And we've heard great things about, his retail offering as well. But it was a brand called Cash and Curry, a bit, a tongue-in-cheek version of Cash and Carry, which instead of just doing something for the sake of doing it and creating a product, we always felt that there was definitely a demand for Sri Lankan products, for not just home kits, but even sort of things like curry powders and spices and ethnic ingredients that people wanted delivered home. And obviously, lockdown has meant everyone's cooking at home, everyone's looking for a unique experience. And that product has really, done well. So we spent a long time. We could have launched it sort of towards the end of first lockdown, second lockdown, but we spent a long time and we did it properly. And we created something that will definitely remain as part of our business going forward. So I think retail's here to stay in some form or the other, especially, and I know you're going to talk about this a little later, and like I mentioned, Adam might, but I especially think in our segment where we're fairly niche in terms of Sri Lankan food, where we're at a very accessible price point. I feel retail is definitely here to stay. We've seen a massive demand especially in the last sort of 3 or 4 weeks for these boxes. Everyone's sort of planning their takeaway and their weekends and evenings, maybe even at a cost of our standard hot food delivery going down a little bit. And yes, there will be a correction of that once restaurants open. I see delivery being more convenience food, whereas these kits being more of a celebration and more of that experience that one would normally have in a restaurant. So we've really tackled Cash and Carry as almost like a restaurant opening on the national stage. And I do feel that while Londoners might start eating out a lot more, there will still be a demand out in the country for these boxes and for retail offering. Other things we've done, as have other businesses, have sort of streamlined the team operations. And I think one of the jokes we had with the team last year was, unfortunately, given the stop-start nature of things, hospitality ended up being the biggest loser. And that's going to, a lot of our focus over the next few months when we reopen is going to be just getting that hospitality, getting that camaraderie, and getting that confidence of the team up. And I think the biggest winner was winter last year, where you couldn't have imagined people sitting out on terraces in the bitter cold. But I guess that's something that's here to stay. So look forward to that.
So a lot of things that you can bring on and work into a more normal situation, and also through the sort of transition back towards that, I guess. And as you mentioned, I mean, Adam, you've been up to quite a bit. You launched Home by AH with a delivery service with a reach across the UK as well, which I was interested in. Just wondering if you could explain a little more about how that worked, what you've learned about the implementation, and fine-tuning that, and then looking ahead as well. You mentioned that you've got, say, a more affordable service and a sort of a higher-end service. I don't know if there's anything that you can learn between the operating of two different, if I've got the right end of the stick, between operating those sort of two different facets of what you're offering there?
Yeah, well, our home delivery service, we didn't do really so much of it in the first lockdown. I didn't create anything. I didn't think, and I'm sure a lot of people in London thought, that who would shut London down for this length of time? We've never experienced this sort of thing. So I was just, waiting it out. And my food doesn't really travel. I've never been interested in it. I didn't want to do it. But bills came racking in, zero support from any of my landlords, and I have 10 sites in London, so that was a real kick in the teeth. And we had to create something. So we created Haim, but to be pretty much, if you're eating in a restaurant, how to get it at home. And that was a very difficult part. So if I'm honest, it only took me 2 weeks, me and my senior team, to design the logo, create the packaging, get everything on the go, and get it sent out. And I do remember something which makes me laugh now. When I first launched it, the QR code, watch me cook it with you, to make it basically idiot proof for at home. And the amount of abuse I got on social media because no one wants to do this sort of thing, and from chefs and everything like that. And I don't pay attention to any of that rubbish, but just seeing at it now, we make just under £500,000 a month on home deliveries. In terms of our restaurant group, it's been phenomenal. I pay all my rent, I pay all my bills, I pay my staff, and I still have a positive EBITDA at the end of it to make my company be, well, as soon as lockdown's over, things are going to be a little more exciting, put it that way. We'll announce it closer. And it's just said that lockdown for outside area is the 12th and inside area is the 17th of May, so 12th of April, which is not so good on our half because we don't really have a lot of outside seating. But our home delivery, we try to do as much work in the kitchen as possible. So when it comes to cooking, you get to have lobster, caviar, you get all, it's a luxury high-end delivery service. And that was because we wanted to really be true to our brand and it be as if you were eating in the restaurants, but with a lot more sharing elements in mains. So I've tested a lot of boxes, and Karan, I really want to try yours because yours looks awesome. And the one thing that frustrates me a little bit about them, and that's where I just don't want to do, and I created mine, was there are a lot of elements and a lot of things to do at once. So I've designed a menu where there is not that much to do, but yet sharing main courses, whole beef Wellington, a whole truffle roast chicken, and a whole comfy shoulder of lamb with couscous and all that sort of stuff. So keeping it really simple and family styled, but like really well made. And well, Valentine's Day broke me and also the entire team. We did 10,000 individual units. It was ridiculous. But things like that is the only reason why my restaurant group's still afloat. It's going to stay open. We're still going to do this. It's actually moving into its own building in 2 weeks, and it'll be a continually arm of my restaurant group.
Okay, fantastic. And got a couple of questions trickling in from the audience, but rest assured, they're topics we will come to as we sort of open up more of a general conversation. So thanks for those, and we'll get there. And thank you, Adam. So another aspect of this, and it's something, Steve, when we spoke about ahead of the webinar that you touched on, which is also incredibly important, is keeping in touch with your customer base and reaching out to new people. I know you've done a lot of sort of virtual tasting activity, as some others have done out there, backing it up with sort of strong presence on social media. Just wondering if you could sort of outline what you've been up to briefly, and then how much of that you're looking to sort of take forward with you into the future. Hi, I think you're still on mute.
There you go. Sorry. Yes, actually, how it happened for us, lockdown was in March, and we had a wine tasting in a place, and unfortunately we couldn't make it. So lastminute.com, we found a way to just say, okay, take a car, deliver it to the customer, say we're going to try to do something because it's already paid. Instead of refunding, and I said, okay, try something. And we've done this virtual wine tasting, which for the first one was quite good actually. So then we twisted a bit, and now we're doing, I think the last lockdown we've done 1,800 people on virtual wine tasting. And we do now cocktail bar, virtual tasting as well. And what we've done, we associate ourselves with a Gilles charcuterie. So now we can do packaging for people for cheese charcuterie, and like 3 different bottles of wine. And I think for us, that's what makes us surviving for during this lockdown, to be honest, because as about even when the last time was you had to eat, get some drinks, we couldn't because we don't do food at all in our place and we don't have any kitchen. So that was the only way for us to survive was to do something online and do virtual testing. Good thing we were to approaching now big company. So instead of meetings, they're doing this kind of big testing. And that's for us very, very helpful, to be honest, because all this testing are quite a lot of money actually for a small business like us to make like 1,800. We've got few coming as well in next month as well. They're just helping to pay the rent and the staff. But saying that, I think we're going to keep doing it because I think it's a good source of money as well. And we're going to keep it, even if when we reopen it, we will keep this wine tasting and bar tasting because I think there is a market for it actually. There is a market for all these big companies when they, like UK-wise, actually they can offer that as a kind of party or something, and it does work very well.
Okay, brilliant, thanks. And I want to return to this in a short while. Actually, we'll hear from Stephen in just a second, but about kind of how you resource all of these new strands and channels, retail, tasting, etc., because I think that's going to be quite interesting. How people are planning to sort of fold all this extra stuff into the mix. But I think before we get there, Stephen, we've heard some interesting examples of adaptation, how operators are looking to continue to evolve their businesses. We looked at the sort of macro and some of the micro levels. One side of hospitality that's obviously close to Harpers Wine and Spirit's heart is the drink side, as our title would suggest, which also provides vital margin for restaurants. So what are your pandemic takeaways on the drinks front? Do you think we're going to witness much change in terms of the drink offer, in terms of, I don't know, range, pricing? Will there be a sort of continued acceleration of the sort of hybrid, the sort of hybrid style of business like Vagabond, one which you kind of helped to pioneer? What are your thoughts on that side of things?
Let's see how many questions you can pack into that one question there, Andrew.
Yeah,
thanks.
I'm going to give you a hard time. So.
I mean, I think everyone's probably going to be in the same boat as us, where with the various lockdowns, just really had to sort of streamline the drinks menu as well as the food menu. Just fewer things, focus on that, get the volume up. Unfortunately, it also tends to be focused more around the higher margin things. So there's a little bit of a dumbing down of the list, but that's all temporary because once things start coming back to normal, we'll be the first to lead that charge to get back to like the drinks list that makes us excited and makes our guests excited. I think the bigger question is just going to be, more Brexit related. When you place an order for a few pallets of something, when's it going to show up? We're working through that. Everyone is. No one knows, but I think that's going to be the more relevant issue going forward. In terms of like hybrids and innovations and stuff, definitely the hybrid model is just inherently higher margin than a traditional like drinks retailer. What's interesting with the whole lockdown and all that is they're the ones who are winning, like doing really well in lockdown. Independent merchants, what was it, like 55% reported a increase in sales over last year. On trade sales are a large proportion of our sales, so we did not share in that good news story. However, much like Steve, we did do some pivots and innovations. We also have these little wine flights with little mini bottles and stuff that trying to give the Vagabond wine experience at home, which is just absolutely flying out the door. And we're building a whole subscription service around that, which is going to be really transformational. But I'd also just point back to something we did in Lockdown 1.0. We were working on this longer term anyway, but we created an app for our self-dispensing machines. At Vagabond, we've got these machines, you press buttons and wine comes out. But we had this app thing, so we expedited it so that you could go into a Vagabond and it's completely contactless experience. You can just use your phone, boop, wine comes out into your glass. never have to touch another person, or there's not another person in the chain of custody of the drinks. Is the most COVID secure thing possible. So it's really unfortunate once they introduced table service only, that went out the window. And then we got the extra labor costs. But with the extra labor costs, that also going through that showed us what is really possible. So productivity, like we thought we were doing pretty good before, and with all the various lockdowns, we just, several percentage points lower was achievable. How much of that is going to be, transferable into the future? We'll see. But for the time being, I think there are definitely some lessons there where we can leverage learnings on labor. We can still manage the balance sheet, inventory levels, cash days, all that stuff, until better days arrive. But also continue to ride the wave on this whole, distance engagement with our guests, whether it's the little bottles or other things. So I probably didn't answer any of your questions. I apologize, but I feel better for it.
No, you did actually, and it's we've got a neat sort of seeding of questions from the audience, and a couple that I wanted to lead into as well. So let me just flip those around, because we just had a question from Alistair Morell asking, upon opening, what is the best strategy to do what punters know, or to try different things to engage? So I guess this includes flexing the drinks offer, the menu, kitchen possibly, managing customer expectations, etc. So I don't know who might pick that up. Karan, could we return to you?
Sure. Again, Andrew, I think on that point we've had a little bit of experience in the past with the reopenings. Personally, our view is once we're allowed to reopen, obviously subject to the various tiers and the fine tuning and the rules that come out, I think there's going to be a rush on them. You guys mentioned as well, I think there's going to be a rush on the restaurants. It's going to be a bit like last year. The weather's going to be a lot better. So I don't see, in that sense, we've definitely taken a bullish view. We've taken a bullish view. Things will be busy. The bits that I feel we're going to struggle with a little bit, and again, a lot of restaurants will, depending on your model. I know my model suffers from this, especially the King's Cross restaurant. Lunches are going to be hard because business is unlike, punters and the offices are not going to be in any rush to open. Whether it's the financial sector, media sector, and others, they're not going to take a risk. They don't need to. In fact, a lot of their working patterns are going to change for good. I think there'll be fewer people in offices, which is directly going to impact our lunch trade. It's going to impact our early evening trade, especially at, we do 4 turns in an evening, sometimes on a good day, even more. Depending on the size of the restaurant, I see that first turn is completely dried out in an area like King's Cross. I think dinner will also become more of a main event. Restaurants like ours, when we first opened in Soho, it was very much, we didn't do dessert, we didn't do coffees. And the idea was you come in, you put your name on a queue, we'll even recommend where you can go and have a drink. We'd send you off to a bar, we'll call you, we'll make it as seamless as possible, as much fun as possible. But you'd come and spend 45 minutes or an hour and then go on and maybe have dessert somewhere and then go and end up in a bar. All that is gone, at least for the near future. Dinner is very much, and this is what we saw last year as well, dinner is a main event. You're meeting friends, you've curated it, you want to be there for 2.5 hours. So maybe the finer dining establishments will benefit, but again, I think everyone's going to see a drop in table turns, a change in the pattern of eating. And obviously a lot of that late night crowd that would have turned up, that's gone as well. So we're talking about, presumably the problem that a neighborhood restaurant has always had. You only get your trade between sort of 7:30 and 9 o'clock, and you need to maximize it. So that's going to be a big challenge. Sort of on the back end of things, I think while furlough has been extremely helpful, there's going to be that initial sort of thing of, just getting the staff ready to work again. A lot of them have been doing things on the side, have been, have gotten used to a little bit of furlough, have also been thinking, and fair enough, they've been thinking about other opportunities, especially the junior staff. Some of them have gone away to Europe. We don't know who's going to come back and who's not. So I think initially there's going to be a staffing crunch. There's going to be that whole retraining hospitality. thinking outside just PPE and distancing and thinking more about the guest and all that stuff we'd worked so hard to build up to. But again, I'm confident all that can come back fairly soon once we're just allowed to have a clear run of it. I hope that answers some of the question.
Yes, in fact, two slightly different ones. I mean, I think there are two really good points in there. One is about the difference in trade, especially in sort of city centres. I know, Des, we spoke a little bit about that. What are business models going to have to change, especially if you're a group? And what if you're a single operator, say in the centre of a big urban area? I mean, is that going to be a long-term and potentially sort of fatal blow, or how to overcome that?
I hope not.
Well, no, I didn't mean to be particularly negative.
No, virtually all our restaurants are in city centres, so in London, Manchester, and Leeds in the UK. Look, we've got firstly, answer the question, Andrew, about is this, when we reopen, is it just like, are we going to get back to where we were? And how are we going to reopen? It's really important. I've said to everybody, and we've all said in our business, this is like, we have been through a trauma in this country and the whole world, a trauma. It's not just a case of, oh, hey, it's over, we can reopen, let's go back, business as usual. It is not that. And I think we've all got to rethink afresh, almost like we're opening new restaurants in terms of all the detail of everything that we do. And I think we just will need to communicate to our customers a freshness. It's not back to the future. It really is. People have fell out of this lockdown. And when they come out, and they're going to come out in big numbers. I've even been messaged this morning from people saying, hey, looking forward to the announcement, Des. We're going to be first day we're allowed to come. We're going to come to your restaurants. So I do think we need to capture that. The couple of other important points: city centres are going to be different. The offices are not coming back. Retail isn't coming back. Restaurants are going to suffer less, though, than you might think. And we had a flavour of that in between the lockdowns. So when we Coq d'Argent, bang in the middle of the city, 14 Hills, bang in the middle of the insurance district, nobody around, but actually we were reasonably busy. And the reason for that is that people, whilst they may not be going to their offices as often, they're going 2-3 days a week, they still need to meet each other. They won't be coming into the offices in order to sit on their laptops and do what they can do at home. They'll be coming to meet each other. When they meet each other, they won't just be meeting in offices. I mean, who wants to go and sit in an office meeting room and meet people? They'll be coming to the restaurants and the hotel lobbies and the cafes. So, and what we found was in restaurants like Coq d'Argent, even though offices were, between lockdowns, offices were 10-15% occupancy, we weren't doing anywhere near close to 100%, but we were doing 60-70% of our normal revenues. So I think the city centre's got a major challenge, okay, from what they are. We don't want to have lots of empty shop units. We don't want to have crime in the cities. We need our theatres to come back. We need tourism back. And restaurants have got a massive part to play in creating reasons for people to go into cities. There are a couple of other challenges that we're seeing. We're seeing it already. And we've all stopped talking about Brexit, apart from the fishermen who find that they can't get their fish to the markets. Our industry is going to be talking about Brexit, because for us, we have lost a number of staff compared to, we had in the UK, we had about 2,000 staff going into COVID. We're now about 1,400. And of the drop in staff, the majority of the reduction in numbers is staff from the EU. They've gone back. They've gone back to France and Italy and Spain, mainly for us, and they are coming back. They're not coming back in the UK. So when we reopen, I agree with Karan was saying that I think it is going to be we're going to be busy. We're going to be really, really busy. The sun's going to come out. People are going to think, oh my God, at last we can go to a restaurant, meet our friends, we can have a drink. It's going to be great. And we are going to very, very quickly see staff shortages. And the long-term challenge for the UK industry is the great renaissance in restaurants has been created by lots of talent coming from all over the world to the UK. You know, we used to be absolutely rubbish. We have some of the worst restaurants in the world. They used to say, now we have had some of the best. And how can we, in the future of the reality of our relationship with Europe and the relationship with the rest of the world, continue that? Because if we run into staff shortages, it's not just a staff shortage, it's a skill shortage. And it's also the ability, you know, people like Adam are doing amazingly high-end food, which requires skilled people and it requires innovation. Can we, in the next 10 years, you know, can we continue to do that and remain at the forefront of the dining scene, you know, as New York has? And actually, New York is having the same issues. New York is going through the same, you know, they think there is an existential crisis because everyone's buggered off to the Hamptons, so they've all gone to Florida because the weather's much better. And they think, well, you know, they don't need to go into their offices. So is, you know, what's New York going to be like? They don't have some of the staffing issues. They've got some of the issues about revenue. So it is certainly not, we're going to be reopening to a new world, and we're going to have to be optimistic, and we're going to have to think about the future, not simply just reopen it and carry on from where we were a year ago.
Adam, would you fancy picking up on that? I mean, this is actually generating, I think we've hit a sort of twin vein, if you like, of Brexit and the impact. And Laurent Bergman's popped up a comment, certainly have an impact that nobody can measure yet. So we're seeing some effect on staff not returning, perhaps some returning home. Stephen, you mentioned certainly on the drinks side, there are issues on the food side as well in terms of imports. Which will certainly take some time to iron out if indeed they are. We're sticking with the sort of staffing side of it. Someone else has asked if we're in danger of losing out to Europe and other international markets. I think they're talking about the trade as a whole because of the sort of skill drain. What's the thinking here? I mean, is this a time that we can actually overturn, as someone else makes the point that staffing in hospitality is too often being seen as not so necessarily a sort of serious career. It's something that, you know, students do part-time, or, you know, that classic cliche, you know, while you're waiting for your next acting role to come along or something. Now, we all know it's not like that, and it's a really serious industry. But is this a time for a reboot? Can we actually use this positively, or is it going to be more of a firefighting the damage, do you think, in terms of chefs, front of house, sommeliers, etc., etc.?
I think if there's any business which is inspiring and actually has a direction, a training program, you'll be able to find staff. And I think the way that businesses have treated staff now during lockdown, when they need help, is going to be the deciding of where to go back to work and where to come to if you're brand new. So I think it's all about how an employer treats their staff when they're in difficulty now is the ones that won't suffer.
Yeah, does anyone else want to add to that? I mean, Steve or Stephen, either of you? Steve.
Yeah, I think, you know, staff-wise is going to be a problem, I'm sure. But like Adam said, if you look after them, even during this lockdown, we're doing training. I've got Dimitri Menard from Jackson Family, who's my partner, who's doing wine training with them on Zoom to keep them, you know, like, occupied and look after them and doing WCT level 3 and stuff like that. And I think when you start to do that, staff start to really appreciate now. They understand, like, they've got friends who they lost the job, no furlough, nothing at all. And even if furlough is not great in a way, they appreciate what it is better than nothing. They can still pay the rent and learn something, and they know they got a job when we're reopening. So I think staff-wise, training is important, but I think we will be able to find some more staff, and I think professional people will be on the market as well, to be honest.
So we just had another question in, which asking the panel, will you consider motivating your skilled staff with better salaries and work-life balance in order to retain them? I think we could almost relate that to a slightly wider question as well. I mean, among all of this and the challenges that are being faced, are businesses kind of undervaluing themselves? It's you know, famously fairly low margin, difficult to operate, long hours. I mean, we all know the story. I mean, it's a fantastic, exhilarating kind of piece of theatre meets you know, quality-driven people to pull all of this together to put in front of people what they are working somewhere else hard to earn, so that they can go and spend their money to have pleasure. I mean, we all know that, but are things literally going to cost more? How do we fund all of these different strands and make them come together? You know, the additional add-ons, the evolution, the quality staffing, the continued training up of staff. How does one resource and fund all of that? Would anyone like to pick that up?
The price of a restaurant meal will go up.
Yeah, as simple as. Any other thoughts, Stephen? Can the market bear more as it comes out? I mean, some people have, you know, been saving madly. Others are, you know, obviously without jobs, hard up, spent their savings. So it's a real sort of mixed bag, isn't it? An imbalanced kind of world out there.
It is. I'm pretty concerned about, going back to what Des was mentioning in the very beginning, like the level of government support has been absolutely atrocious. And we know the coronavirus wasn't the government's fault. Lockdowns was a policy decision. It wasn't foreordained by nature. And the level of support for that policy decision has been absolutely inadequate to scale of the damage that they've caused. And we have been pretty fortunate, mainly because we were one of the beneficiaries of the Supreme Court's judgment against the insurance companies for business interruption insurance. And by the way, I'm so glad it went that way, because they lost in the high court, they appealed and went to the court, lost even worse, which is this. Anyway, so we're going to be in pretty good shape, but there's a lot of folks who won't be. And if they're able to survive, they're going to be limping with a whole lot of debt. So how do you invest when you know, in that situation? I'm concerned about that. I'm also concerned about the people situation. So there's a lot of unknowns. I wish I could sit here and be like, this is my great insight, and everyone's like, oh, that was really interesting and insightful. I do not know what the future holds. I think the most important thing for this stuff is we just have to be, you know, alert and nimble, and just, you know, react like hell to try to take advantage of the opportunities as we see and mitigate the risks as we see them.
Can I make a comment on that?
Yes, please.
On the sort of, on the bigger picture, if you look at, I don't know, Stephen, I don't know if you're sound as though you're from the US, but maybe you're Canadian and you're upset by that. But if you look at the US, and the US government is spending about 3 times in terms of the rescue effort to get us out of COVID. As a percentage of GDP, the forecast is I think they'll spend something like 9%, and we're projecting to spend about 1/3 of that. And Germany and France are spending somewhere less than the US, but more than us. And I think it's a really important thing for government, for Rishi. He must not, in this recovery, sit there thinking, right, now I've got everyone open, it's going to be great. I can now start getting back the taxes to rebuild my deficit. It's more important to make sure that this recovery is properly founded by making companies like us. Not everybody has had a bad pandemic. I'm a non-exec director of Fulham Shore, which is Frank Amanka. We do a fantastic delivery business there, and actually we've had a good pandemic. But there are a whole load of people who have not had a good pandemic, who have got to get through this and contribute to the recovery. So he needs to have a mindset of coming out of it. It's like coming out of the war. We come out of the war, we have to rebuild our economy. And then once the economy is built, you can start thinking about repairing public finances. It's a really important mindset that he needs to have, because if he doesn't, he will cock up the economic recovery coming out of COVID. Just what the point about the long-term impact of staff, and look, everybody, we've all got our businesses, and we all know that there's a macro issue, but in our own businesses, if we look after our staff well and with greater training and so on, we will have our good staff, and we will get staff from other people. But there is a macro picture here, and what it is where I think this is going is, I think we will have higher prices for our restaurants. We will have fewer staff per cover. And it's a business model that you see actually in some of the European countries now. If you go to Switzerland or you even go to France and so on, you see that the way the economics of those restaurants work is that you have fewer staff. I mean, we know it. We operate a restaurant in Paris. You have fewer staff. Your pricing is is higher than it is in the UK, and you just have more productivity. So that is the way that it will go. That is the model. But what may well suffer though, if we go down that route long term, and it's not a choice. I think that's that's likely to happen. It's just through the laws of economics. I mean, you don't have quite as much innovation. You don't have quite as much. Can't spend as much time on perfecting a dish, or can't spend as much time in terms of the level of service in a restaurant. If you compare our restaurant in Paris, Alcazar, it's a great restaurant. It's very, very busy. It does a lot of revenue with the equivalent in the UK, like Pineau. So we have an FT, the employment correspondent, the FT, did an article about this about a year and a half ago. And what you see is just a lower level of service. We have a higher level of service here compared with Paris, where you have a lower level of service. I mean, I've looked at sites, we're looking at sites in Germany and so on. The business model is different. So I do think we are on a path which is, for the economics of a restaurateur, may not be bad. For the customer experience, I think is probably going to be a bit more challenging than we all realize at the moment.
Yeah, that's interesting. Steve, I'm just wondering, because I think I'm right in saying you operate solely in Brighton and Hove. Do you think the market here where I'm sitting, can bear those sorts of rises? How do you think it's going to be a very different experience where your sites are located compared with, say, well, obviously D&D also is outside of beyond the UK shores, as we've heard in Paris and New York. But how do you think it might run in a provincial town or city?
I think for Brighton, slightly different. It's a bit smaller. People are quite following, and they're here to support as well, local and everything. So I think on that, it's difficult. Landlord were a bit, I think, Brighton. I've been very lucky. I've got 5 different landlords, all of them been kind of supporting, I will say, as much as they can. So it's slightly different for Brighton on this kind of point. And I think we will get out of it a bit quicker than London, because our costs are a bit lower than London, big city. Rents are higher, definitely. So I think for us, and as a small business as well, I employ, I can run a business. If I get 1 or 2 staff, I can make it, and I can run a couple of nights as well. And that's how we can make it to be started for us.
Yeah, okay. All right, thanks. Just wanted to go on a slightly different tack. So we've had what I think is an interesting question in, another from the audience, so quite lively today. It's regarding suppliers, and it's from a supplier, basically asking what are you going to need from your suppliers in the run up to opening. So I don't know who might want to pick that up. It's got a couple of different. Adam, perhaps you could kick in. Is there anything specific that suppliers can do to help you meet the slight unknown of reopening? I know you've obviously come out of a couple of lockdowns before, but
no, just to work with the restaurants that we all have in our groups to make it successful. I don't think they need more credit. In fact, the other way around, shorter credit terms. We put credit on our accounts because we did get into a sticky situation at the beginning. So no, just to continually chat and look after each other. Our suppliers, when our home deliveries, because we're only running on 20%, between 15 and 20%, our suppliers have actually lowered their margins on it so that we can survive on our home deliveries. So as much as we're making loads of revenue in terms of its actual, profit, and it's nowhere near as much as a restaurant. So just to continually talk to the chefs in the restaurants. And
I don't know, Stephen, could I pull you in on the specifically on the drinks side, singling you out as the drinks focused person? What of drink suppliers? Is there a different story there? Is there anything more they can do to help?
Well, I mean, to be honest, the suppliers in the drink space that we deal with, they've been absolutely terrific throughout everything. In the very beginning, when we didn't know how long is this going to be, what's the nature? Well, I guess as of today, we kind of know, but we asked everyone for payment plans, just to, let's manage the backlog of sums owed in a more responsible manner. And every single one of them has been working with us. We've had to tailor plans depending on the supplier, but that's been the best thing ever. And I think that because we did engage them early on, and we've stuck to these plans, that we've developed goodwill with a lot of these suppliers. So if we do need to go back to the trough and ask for a little bit more, I'm hopeful. I like to think that there'd be something there for us, but I'm also very aware that, we're not the only victim right here. Like the suppliers, particularly a lot of the wine guys, are very exposed to the on-trade, and we want them to be there on the other side of this. So we're trying to just do whatever we can to help them as well. So it's not just this way, it's also that way. So, and to be clear, Adam, were you saying you want shorter credit terms in return for lower prices, or just something else?
No, only lower prices on home deliveries, because our margins are far lower. And I think if they look after us that way, it'll be great. But in terms of my suppliers, I put either credit on account. So my alcohol suppliers are all done by pro formas, but my food suppliers, so the chefs can continue order the protein or whatever, we put 10, 20,000 on there, which should last them a couple of weeks. But the one thing that messes up at the beginning was suppliers sending invoices too late. There's nothing worse than reconciling your accounts and you get an order for a £2,000-3,000 veg order, say, come in 2 months later because it's been missed. So that a chef might forget to process that, and it bounced back and all them sort of things. So just be a little bit more up to date on sending statements, maybe twice a month rather than once a month.
Okay, great. Karan, anything to add to that, or has it all been said?
I think on that side, our suppliers have been hugely helpful, and it's almost amazing just to see that the relationships have grown stronger with the guys who've been supplying us. Like Adam said, for our at-home products, where the margins are much, much thinner, there's a huge staff cost involved. We're almost doing it as a marketing exercise and, to stay relevant, as opposed to making piles of cash and to keep people employed. So we've definitely come out with stronger relationships there. Credit lines have gone down across the board, but again, they've been as understanding as we can imagine. So I think it'll be, to an extent, it'll be, like Adam said, just, talking to each other. And hopefully from the government, we have enough notice, because they've got a whole new set of problems in terms of stocking products they bringing in from the EU when we reopen. So, yeah. I think there will be a question of, having to talk to them a lot more and looking for alternative products when we come to that, but that's more a Brexit question. Yeah,
sure, which is another can of worms, and one of the we've still been following and covering a lot. So just to add to the ways, and I think it's to be clear there as well, without in any way diminishing the immense challenges faced by hospitality trade, as I think maybe Stephen, you mentioned that there are suppliers that are specific to on-trade on the drink side, and obviously on the food side, and who are suffering equally, but not really getting as much sort of airtime or eartime as well. So there, it is a partnership, and one can't really operate without the other. I think by way of beginning to sum up, I'm very happy if anyone wants to jump in and make any other comments. But we've one more question, which might be quite a nice kind of pull out a sort of quick summary from if not all of you, from some of you. So all really interesting. Love what you're all doing, but I'm curious to know if you think the on-trade will return to the pre-COVID format, or are you planning to change the physical setup and philosophical mindset of your businesses? And I know we've sort of covered elements of this, but that's from Natalie Taylor, who's actually at Trade Hospitality, so working with us on this webinar. So I don't know who wants to pick up on that. So will the on-trade return to the pre-COVID format? Are you planning to change the physical setup and philosophical mindset of your businesses? I don't know, Des, do you want to try and tackle that? Probably fairly briefly, because I know we touched on elements of it, but
I hope that our customers will come back to restaurants and think, I want to order that really, really top-end bottles of wine. so that we can sell far more of that lot than the cheap stuff.
Excellent. Stephen, you thumbs up. Is there anything to add to that, or?
Yeah, no, I mean, it sounds like we've all been making adjustments and introducing innovation during the lockdown, and certainly some of this is going to carry through, not everything, but I think it's a good thing for us, and those of us who have been creative, you know, and executed well on this stuff. It's very interesting. I'd like to say, but it's not. Like, it's going to be an interesting time going forward, and you know, we will all do what we do best, and you know, because ultimately we're all entrepreneurs, and we are going to find a way, you know, this in the future, what is the right structure for this business in the future, and it's going to probably just involve a lot of just, you know, thinking, but also being alert and making quick decisions in it. And from what I've heard from all the other panelists, like, you know, we're all on the same boat that there is going to be a different future for us.
Yeah, and that agility has been absolutely amazing to watch, to experience, to write about, to report on. Steve, any thoughts to add on that?
Yeah, I think, you know, during this lockdown, we all try to get something as Zoom meeting, stuff like that, delivery, but our main job and income will be still drinking in a bar, eating in a restaurant. So we really hope people will come back. Of course, you know, that's helping us a lot, this kind of online testing and delivery food, which we might keep it on the side, but this time is making surviving. But our bread and butter are still the customer coming in, to be honest. So we need that. We need that. We can't survive with just our delivery and virtual testing. So we might keep it on the side. That's an extra thing. If people are doing it, we still, you know, it's an extra sell point. But we need people to coming back, actually. As simple as that.
Yeah, and I realise this possibly gets more difficult to find some fresh angles to throw in as we go around. But Adam, anything else you wish to add to that?
Since the first lockdown and reopening, it actually made my entire restaurant group's offering better. You know, the tables were more spacious. I removed some tables. I made it as a proper experience, and we're learning from that. So we're not going to change. The service inside the restaurants be even more cooler than what they were before. And our home delivery, like I mentioned, in 2 weeks is actually moving into its own premises because I need my restaurants back, basically. So for me, it's been a learning curve for business, and one where I take the positive with the negative and I learn. Yeah,
fantastic. And Karan, as I suppose, perhaps a final word, unless anyone else wants to jump in. Final word of wisdom.
Well, I think I pulled a short straw here. But in terms of, you know, in terms of summarizing, I think first point would be restaurants have always proven to be extremely resilient. It's something that's so embedded in our culture. It's going nowhere. If at all, you know, I was talking to a friend yesterday, he said there's going to be revenge hospitality. People are going to come out in droves, they're going to eat out. And I you know, like Des said, I hope they're out. I hope they're there to have a better time. Obviously, it benefits the higher end of restaurants a little more than us, who are slightly more sort of mass, slightly cheaper. So we've got to adapt ourselves to see how we still remain profitable. We can't really go up on prices too much. But, you know, like I briefed my team when we reopened after first lockdown, I think people are really dying to go out, and this is our chance to make that super positive impact. So if we did anything well, we should aim to do it much better now, because the opportunity to make that impact is going to be much bigger, because people are hungry. They're desperate. They've not been looked after for a long time. So we should do that. Delivery nationwide, at-home kits will remain in some form. Delivery is here to stay. We can see by, you know, Deliveroo's IPO in the pipeline and all that. And then finally, I think technology is going to play a huge role in restaurants. So technology, logistics are going to play a big role. You need to embrace them and need to get them in. But it's that balance between maintaining and continuing hospitality, which is the most important reason why people walk into a restaurant. It's not, you know, food is secondary. I've always said that and truly believe it, while balancing technology. So if you're McDonald's, yes, you can put a screen up, but if you're a restaurant like any of us, it needs to be very different.
Yeah. Well, I think that's possibly a fantastic place to begin to wrap up, and nicely put. So So final comment from someone saying, with today's announcements, what are the immediate steps? Open bookings for April, May, question mark, communicate with customers via newsletters, question mark. I think rather than posing that question to the panel, I should perhaps close down what I think has been a really interesting session and to let you get on with your planning for all of those things now. And you know, obviously very much personally looking forward to reopening and hopeful that it is as successful as can be for all of you. So I say we've covered a lot of ground today. Thank you very, very much for joining us. And we've had really good audience presence and participation, which is nice to see. So on that note, thank you, Steve, Adam, Karan, Des, and Stephen. Hopefully see you all in the flesh quite soon. Otherwise, thanks for joining us and goodbye for now.